All right. Well, I really do. I'm happy to get into it if you're ready to get into it, but I really do appreciate you for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, welcome to my channel. As I said to you off camera and for everyone listening as well, it's just I like to hear people's journeys through life, different industries, different careers, everything like that. And for anyone who doesn't know as well, you're in the computer world when it comes to editing and documentaries. How would you describe it?
Post-production.
Yep.
And it's all computers now. And, well, look, even in 81, I started as a trainee in 81, and we used computers then. But they weren't like we have now.
No, not like this glow
in the dark thing.
Yeah.
And they were very utility sort of things. You didn't go home and play around a computer. It was a big thing in the office or in the suite. And it was a controller. Okay. So it was sort of like a remote controller for the machines.
So it was like a separate thing entirely. Now everything's inside the computer.
Everything's inside the computer, but then the computers weren't fast enough. I mean, the big challenge with what do they call it? Time-based media. It's like moving pictures is a huge amount of data and moving it really quickly.
Yeah, it is crazy how big, because people wouldn't know just by listening and not doing it themselves, but I think this footage alone is like 450 gigabytes just for this.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I've had to send programs overseas, and it takes days to it could be 800 gig for a 90-minute program.
Oh, wow.
Depending on the codec and things like that. But back then, when I got into it, 1-inch machines had just come out, reel-to-reel 1-inch. Helical scan, each machine was worth, on average, about 120 grand. Oh, wow. Which was quite a lot of money in 1981.
And what was that function? What was the 1-inch machine for?
Well, the 1-inch machine had, it was 2 audio tracks and a video track and a timecode track.
Okay.
Right, so timecode's an audio track, but in a different place. So the helical scan, across the 1-inch of tape, the audio tracks were on one part. I think the timecode track was away because it was such a saturated signal, terrible noise. It sounds like computer noise, And then the vision tracks were diagonal. Right, and I think each diagonal was one line of vision on the screen, and so it'd feed off through the head, and it'd go through the head at a slight diagonal, and that diagonal was the exact diagonal of the video lines, and the head drum, the head was about that round, and it went very fast. So, I mean, you could probably calculate it because it's 720 lines, so 360 lines every 50th of a second.
Oh, wow, that is fast.
And that would give you... And we talk about how, like, things are scaffolded on. So, in a way, even though... the video that we have now is all completely different. It's kind of built on the old system. So now we've got like pixels across and pixels down.
Yeah.
But the pixels down, are like the lines that used to be in the analog days. But analog was a nightmare. The machines had to be lined up really precisely, so that if you can imagine on a CRT tube, you've got a scan that goes right, the old style TVs, glass tube TV.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine that dot of scan, each machine in the system had to have its scan dot in exactly the same place. So the timing of that to get Anyway, it's very.
No, I'm hearing you.
It was painful to set up. It was mighty complicated, and it didn't give you terribly good stuff. You know.
Yeah.
The quality was crap. Anyway, so the way the system worked was you'd have these machines, and so you'd have like the playback machines would have the footage that would be playing back. That would go through a vision mixer. And then there was a fourth machine, so a third or fourth machine, that was the record machine. And so you'd use the computer to coordinate the machines and then send out triggers to the vision mixer. So, you'd be able to program where that dissolve occurred. And it was very important that it was all repeatable, and that maybe a week later the client would come back to change the interest rate, the banks would regularly come in and go, our interest rate is now bleh.
Yeah.
And
you could just change that one little part of the
that one little part. But to drop in that one little part was a nightmare because it's all analog. So, it's not like level 1, level 2, it's just a spectrum, and you've got to, we'd drop in an edit and you'd see there's a slight level difference because the machine's drifted over the week or two since last time, right? And so you go out and just tweak that little bit and come and do the edit again and say, oh, it's a bit over now, so bring it back a bit. Eventually you get it, you know. Sometimes maybe not perfectly, but so close that nobody'd ever notice.
Yeah. So on that little subject then, if for me to do a simple thing when I'm editing my videos, if I just wanted to cut in a different intro to a video, all right? It's always the same 5-minute video, but now I'm having a different intro, and it takes me literally by clicking, but once it's filmed on my computer, including transferring it, editing it, and rendering it, might be 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, something that simple. And that includes from when I press record, to be honest. How long would that simple thing take back in the day?
It's hard to give an exact sort of idea, but it can be painfully complicated.
Yeah.
Like non-linear. We call it non-linear. Like, I suppose people entering the game now go, well, why is it called non-linear, That's because everything used to be linear. So if you were editing on video, right, it was archaic. It was really the best they could do with the technology at the time. So say you edited 20 shots together and then you go, actually, I don't like the second shot. Well, you've got to do the following 19 all over again to pull it up.
Now I get you. Oh, I completely get you now. That's why it was linear, because you had to go through the step from that point all the way through. Damn, wow.
And so there's a lot of challenges. And, back, say, by 1985, so I started in 1981. I was really lucky to have got a traineeship.
How did you end up getting into this career in the first place?
Look, I was a wild, crazy delinquent. When I was even younger, my dad was an artist. My mum was a science teacher.
As in a painter?
Painter, like he, fine art paintings, in that sort of Picasso-y sort of school, Picasso, Cezanne, he liked all of that stuff. So I grew up, in a very arty kind of world. When I was 12, 13, my parents decided we'd go and live in Spain. So I went and lived in Spain for 2 years. I got back, I was about 14 and a half, I think. Nothing was ever the same after we got back from Spain.
Why? Why is that? What do you mean?
Well, everybody changed. We actually came back because everybody got homesick. The whole family, my 2 younger siblings, brother and sister, and mum and dad, and everybody was just chronically homesick. And homesickness it's a real blight. People experience it whenever they go move away from, especially from stuff that gave them a sense of security, or you become nostalgic for that memory. More often than not, you go to fix that and discover that it wasn't, that it's in your memory, and it's time's moved on. Your memory is of that time, not the moved on time.
Yeah, maybe not even of that place. Yeah.
Yeah. So, on that occasion, we came back. We couldn't afford to come back for a holiday, so we came back and realised it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
We were having a much better time in Spain. It was really interesting.
Wow.
Interesting people. There's, the Spaniards, but also the foreigners, and amongst other people, I met Robert Graves, who was famous for having written I, Claudius and Claudius the God, which are two fairly big books. I haven't read them.
I haven't read them either,
but he was a significant sort of person in English literature.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like that. A lot of lesser arts. Paul, can't remember his name.
And but these because your parents were kind of in that world of creative
they're in that world,
expression?
but also because we were foreigners. So the foreigner network. So you'd sort of naturally meet these people just because because we were foreigners.
Yeah, yeah.
But I went to school there. Back then, it was still Franco's Spain. Franco was a ruthless dictator. He won power through the Spanish Civil War, which just preceded the Second World War. When I was at school there, they used to have memorial days for Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, the two big dictators from the Second World War.
Yeah.
And Spain celebrated them.
Wow. I didn't even know Spain was even remotely involved in the war, let alone to give tribute.
Well, no, because by the Second World War, I think Spain was still reeling under its own civil war.
Yeah.
Which I think the Spanish Civil War was like in the early 30s. And look, to be sure, my history of it isn't as good as it should be. Franco, a ruthless dictator, had sanctions. The United Nations had sanctions against Spain because of human rights violations. And I didn't realise that until I came back and looked into it. You drive around and there'd be the Guardia Civil standing on every other corner with a submachine gun over their arm,
Wow.
And
why would your parents want to move there in the first place?
it was an arty thing.
Yeah.
And I think
That's odd for
Charmian.
dictatorship kind of countries as well. It's very odd to be creatively expressive when you're
Well,
like that.
it wasn't going to be Spain. It was going to be the Greek islands, and it's this tradition of Australian arty types back from that era, and Clifton Pugh was an artist. Charmian Clift, I think, was a writer, and they made the Greek islands kind of very trendy and fascinating. So that my parents had decided that when my grandfather died, they'd take whatever money they got from an inheritance. He wasn't well, they were making these plans as he was moving rapidly towards his death. I think alcoholic, other issues too. But anyway, he died, and just around that time, they met. What was his name? Dr. Len Harrop, and Len Harrop was an old queen who had been very successful academic in Spanish culture and philosophy language. So he was the dean of Spanish, I think, in some Canadian university. And he was an Australian, and he'd worked in Australian universities as well. Once again, I'm not fully sure of his history, but he'd retired, cashed out his superannuation or whatever his nest egg was, and bought about a dozen houses in Spain, in Mallorca. So Mallorca wasn't really a tourism destination yet. So he got these places really cheap. And he was, just an eccentric old queen who did all the soft furnishings by hand in the sort of tradition of the area, Mallorquin. So anyway, he was back in Australia visiting friends, and my parents met him at a party. And he's like, "Oh, darling, the Greek islands are so passé. You really should come and live in Spain." And so I went, "Oh, yeah, all right." So, I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't that aware of the dictatorship of, well, I don't know. I mean, it certainly wasn't discussed a lot before we went.
Yeah. I guess we didn't have access to as much internet and stuff like that.
No. Well, that's it. I mean, it's extraordinary. Yeah. The transformation of life because of the internet is phenomenal. I mean, it's just speaking the obvious, really. But so we went and lived in Spain, came back. I'd had total freedom, really. In Spain, in Mallorca, there was no violent crime, really. My parents were very relaxed. We could disappear. The summer holidays there, like 3 months, and, I'd often leave home at 8 a.m. and not get back until midnight, at the age of 13. And they never seemed to be worried, and I had some extraordinary times there.
I would power out those Espanol girls. I definitely
Well,
would have
no,
a great time over there.
no, no girls.
Oh.
Very good Catholic country. And, it would be a rarity to see a girl out after dark.
Oh, wow. Wow. I guess that's a good thing. Yeah.
Well, look, it's, it's the impact of religion controlling society. But anyway, came back and, it was just very hard to settle back down into a regular life again. I'd gone to school there and learned Spanish. One-room school. The village we're in was about 750 people. One-room school, 35 kids, and 6 different courses, I think. So it was like from year 1 to year 6 and then if you wanted to go to high school, you had to go to the next village, the bigger village down this.
Wow, that's crazy.
And the teachers were all sent out from Madrid, and it was part of Franco's vision to unify Spain. Because in a way, Spain is a whole group of smaller countries, all banged together. And their dialects are very strong, very different. Mallorquin is very different from Castilian, Catalan. Mallorquin and Catalan are very similar. Catalan is the language in the area of Barcelona. And then
I didn't even know there was more than one language at all.
Well, anyway, it's Franco's vision to unify Spain by having everybody learn the same language.
Okay.
So I went in, and the only class that I had to do was Spanish.
Yeah.
And I was in with the 6-year-olds.
Yeah.
So, and that was good because the 6-year-olds were learning Spanish for the first time too.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I got, great training. Anyway, came back and I went into middle term second form, which would be year 8. Because back then it was years 1 to 6 in primary and then years 1 to 6 in high school.
Okay.
And I don't remember when they changed it to years, 7 to 12. But so I only ended up doing 4.5 terms of secondary school because I came back for middle term year 7, year 8, middle term year 8. And there's only 3 terms a year too then.
Oh, okay.
And then I left. By the time I got to what would have been year 10, I was gone. I just fought with my parents furiously, which is sort of weird. People were always kind of a bit confused about it because they came across as hippies, really, my parents. But my mother was actually quite conservative. And so it was sort of, being a hippie was kind of more of a fashion statement, I think,
Yeah.
So anyway, I left home. I did 6 years of shit jobs. They got better and better. One job I had for a year was working with a radio announcer called Phil Haldeman on 2KY. And I can remember his daughter Viv and I were quite good friends. And in fact, the Haldemans had come to stay with us, with our family in Spain for a couple of weeks while we were there, or a week or two. And that was great to have them over there. So when I got back, Viv had gone to uni, and I was, this delinquent lunatic out, and Viv was expected to work for her dad every Sunday from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. doing a radio show. The radio show really went from 9 till 3, Phil Haldeman's Weekend World on 2KY. And Viv sort of went, Dad, I work all week at uni. I've got all my uni work to do. I don't get much time to see my friends. So I really value my weekends. But, Roen could really do with the money, and the experience might be good for him too. So Phil went, oh, yeah. So I got a year's working on 2KY, just on Sundays, for a little bit of cash. And that was really good.
How many radio stations have there been back in the day? How many?
Oh, plenty. I mean, no less than there are now, I'd say. I mean,
yeah. But now there's still not even very many today, I guess. There's probably only 10 on AM and 10 on FMA. I can't think.
Maybe I've never really gone and audited it, but it's I mean, look, I listen to the radio quite a lot when I'm driving, but it's mainly just the ABC. But yeah, 2KY was actually it had something to do with the labour movement. I think now it's owned by, oh no, that's 2GB. I'm not sure. It was in the Labour building, or the trade union building in Sussex Street, and I think it's still there. It was interesting work, and I got to meet amazing people like Engelbert Humperdinck.
I wouldn't know who that is, yeah.
He's an old singer. And all sorts of other people that would come in for interviews, and I got to order the lunches, and then they started teaching me panel operating, which was really good. Anyway, after a year of that, Phil came to me and went, mate, things are changing. We can't keep employing you. We've got to do this and that. It's all, but it's been really good, and here's a reference. So I spotted a job, actually I think my mother spotted it, as a librarian at Channel 9, working in the videotape library. Didn't really know what that was all about, but I applied, and on the strength of Phil's reference, I got the job, which is really cool. And I liked working there. The money was good. Endless overtime. I could work as much overtime as I wanted.
Oh, wow.
Look, within reason. I mean, I could work only until 10 o'clock each night, because you couldn't have less than a 10-hour break, because that had put you on double time all the next day, which I did enjoy later in my career, but for a bit it was good.
What was the kind of roles there? And when you say video organizer and librarian in that sense?
Video library, it was programs in and out, really. Programs from overseas would come in. There's a bond store, which is I don't fully understand. It's a way of dealing with customs, and so programs would come in from overseas. I guess there was tax payable or duty or something. They'd have to be held for a period. I think customs would have to come and inspect. I'm not sure. And then the programs would come in. They'd go to air on Channel 9 Sydney, and then that episode would have to go, say, to Melbourne, right? And that in those days, satellites were like furiously expensive. 10,000 a minute or something, you know, like, I mean, don't quote me, but
Yeah.
some ridiculous astronomical amount. And and the bearer, there was a bearer that would carry the signal, but it wasn't very good quality. So generally, programs would be physically distributed around the country. So we'd get a program in, and we'd have to be sure that all the programs. So we'd actually have shelves for each day, for each week. And so as the date for transmission got closer, you'd be saying, oh, well, there's that missing and that missing. Why haven't we got this one yet? So we'd be sort of early warning for where's this program? It's got to go, you know, it's on air next week.
Crazy. So it's like having a DVD collection at your house, trying to manage the next up and coming episodes. Like,
yeah,
that's
but
cool.
like day by day and week by week, you know. So, and then there was other duties in there, dispatch too. So the Sunday show, was it the Sunday show, a 60 Minutes Sunday? One of them, and it had to go out I think it was 60 Minutes. Oh, it was Sunday. Channel 9 had this sort of flagship program on Sunday mornings, business and politics and stuff. Business Sunday was, memory's a bit hazy, but I remember we'd have to go, it was shift work, so it'd be Saturdays and Sundays, definitely Saturdays. I think it was Saturdays, because one of these programs, which I think was the Sunday show, would have to be dispatched so that it would get out to the other places. Urgent courier, you know, so it was there by the next morning. And I remember one day this woman came in and she thought, oh, you know, this little kid in tape library, you know, how do we know, how can we rely on him? And so she said, now, you've got to ensure this gets to Canberra in time because it has to be seen by the Prime Minister before it goes to air. Right, I thought, well, that's really serious. I'll make sure it gets there. And so I rang ahead and said, look, you know, this is dispatched now, but as the producers just told me, it's got to be in Canberra in order for the Prime Minister to see it. Well, that was a load of bullshit.
yeah, fair.
Right? And she just said that to try and ensure, without any idea, that I would ring, right? And so then the Bureau in Canberra is panicking. Oh, my God, the Prime Minister's got to see it, right? And so they raised Mary Hell in Canberra before they realised that it was just this woman winding me up.
Yeah.
But that was the sort of stuff. Anyway, while I was there, I was a terrible party animal, you know.
Yeah, good.
Party animal, substance abuser, you know, ne'er-do-well, having a ball, earning good money, spending it as fast as I could earn it. And so generally, you know, I'd always pay the rent and have coins to pay my bus and train fares to get to work. I was living in Chippendale. And so I'd get to work. They had a system there you could get an advance on your wages. So sometimes I'd, you know, go and get $40 advance, and then, you know, that'd just be taken out of your wages on Thursday. Cash, used to get cash money. You know.
Man, if I could get advances on my wages right now,
and
I'd be mad. I'd be so mad.
No, it was good. It was good. And working for Kerry Packer.
Yeah,
and look, I've got to say,
and Kerry Packer was the owner of the news building, was it? What was Kerry Packer's job? I can't remember.
No, well, Murdoch's News Limited, but Kerry Packer owned Channel 9.
Channel 9,
and Consolidated Press, I think, Consolidated Press. So I think there was papers in there. Was there? I don't know. But yeah, Kerry Packer, and he was pretty hard-ass sort of businessman. But every year he would distribute a hamper to every member of staff. And you'd get a really good esky. And in the esky would be like a bottle of port, a bottle of white wine, a bottle of red wine, you know, half a leg of ham, all the like good stuff, you know,
Yeah,
and it would have
yeah.
cost a bomb. you
Yeah,
know.
a good Christmas bonus.
And
yeah.
these trucks would arrive, you know, in a week or two before Christmas, and because hundreds of people working there, you know, to be offloading and distributing them to everyone.
Yeah. I think he was Australia's richest man at one point, wasn't he?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's definitely, you know, and then like, well, TV stations made money, you know, not anymore.
Yeah,
But-
yeah. I can
But back
imagine.
then, you know, so what? Video killed the radio star, and internet killed the television station.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I worked at Channel 9, and so I'd party animal away, and so by Monday, I'd have barely any money,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I'd do overtime until 10, and then I'd generally walk down. It was in Willoughby. I'd walk down to Willoughby Road, and hitch home.
Yeah.
So there I was hitching home one night, and this guy picked me up, and I would never have guessed he was gay.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was wearing stubbies and thongs, and he had this big 4-wheel drive, and it's like, jump in, mate, you know, is that where you going? What are you doing there? I said, oh, I just finished work. Oh, where do you work? Channel 9. Oh, you work at Channel 9. Yeah. He said, oh, do you know Bruce Robertson, Paget Play? He rattled off all these executives. How do you know them? He said, oh, I used to be an engineer at Channel 9. He said, I got out and built an independent place. Oh, really? He said, look, if you're interested in a career in television, why don't you come and have a drink with me? I'm going to meet some friends from the ABC. Oh, no, look, it's right. No, come on, don't be silly. Well, why not? Well, look, I'm hitching home because, you know, I can't afford to buy a drink. So, you know, oh, don't be silly, I'll buy you a drink. You know, so anyway, he talked me round. Ended up going to this gay pub up in like Flinders Street or somewhere, and it wasn't as if it was the first time I'd been in a gay bar.
Yeah.
You know? But he goes, oh, you know, you'll be safe. Don't you worry, you'll be with me. And I said, yeah. That's all right. And so I had a beer and thanked him very much and started to leave. Oh, don't be silly, how are you going to get home? I said, I'll walk. To Chippendale, that'll take you, it'll take 40 minutes, you know, I'll be right, you know. Oh, don't be silly, I'll drive you. No, yeah, all right. So he drives me. Driving home, it's like, oh, you should come and work with me. I'll make you the company courier. Oh, no, I'll stick it out at Channel 9, thanks anyway. So, oh, no, I'll make you trainee editor. No, look, you know, I'll stick it out. We get to my place, and he says, look, why don't you, you know, don't be silly, just get yourself some clean undies and come to my place. I've got a jacuzzi, I've got alcohol, I've got, you know. Oh, look, thanks, Brian, but, you know, no, maybe another time. Thanks anyway. He says, well, look, he gets out a bit of paper and writes down his phone number. He says, if you change your mind, give me a call. So I put it in the back of my wallet and didn't really think much more about it until about 6 months later when they were doing building works. Channel 9 had been winning the ratings for like the last 5 years or something. They were just creaming it. And so Kerry decided that it was time that Channel 9 had a big makeover. And so our department, these guys were walking around in like hazmat suits
Yeah.
and cutting down the walls with huge circular saws. You couldn't see from one end of our department to the other. And they were expecting us to work.
Yeah, and to be honest, it was probably a lot of shit like asbestos and shit back then.
I
too.
reckon.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd become very friendly with this woman who worked in the next department. So our department was videotape. Her department was like the film library, which wasn't quite as big because not as many programs went around on film. There's still a lot. And her job really was to splice together ad breaks and things like that in rolls of film. So anyway, she was rostered on that day, and we were quite good friends. And she said, well, she's terribly pompous. We're not working through this. It's just, this is outrageous. Let's go to lunch, and we'll come back after, find out when they're going to be finished. So off we went. We actually got a cab to Doyle's and had this fabulous fish lunch and blew far too much money and had a great time. Came back and worked. On Monday, Padgett, the operations manager, called me into his office. He said, "You went there on Saturday, where were you?" I said, I went out and, I don't give a fuck what they were doing. You were paid to be there and you weren't. Somebody came looking for you and it was a big problem that you weren't there. I'm thinking of firing you. I'll let you know on Friday. So Friday he called me in and fired me.
Oh, well.
He then went on to start giving me this whole lecture on. I said, Padgett, is anything that you're about to say going to change my employment status? No. Well, why don't you save your breath?
Yeah.
And so I went, fired me. He had a payout for me there. He gave me that. I was on my way. So I walked back around to my department and pulled out my wallet and rang Brian.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Brian. Remember me?
Yeah.
He went, oh, yeah, sure. Oh, look, I'll come and have lunch with me next week and we'll talk about it. So I did. And a month later, I was a trainee video editor.
Yeah, mad.
And look, it was the best decision I ever made, I think, in my life. Brian went on to be like an industry maverick, really. He was very broadly known. He went on to work at Film Australia, which was sort of the government film unit. He trained quite a few people. And then died of AIDS. Poor bugger. He certainly did a lot for me and my career. Trained me not just on the technicals, but it was a very technically demanding job. But also, how to deal with people, how to work in the industry.
How old were you when you went over there?
I was 21.
21, yeah.
Landed on my feet at 21. So, and also because, I was looking around at all my friends. They're all at uni. They're all sort of learning professions and, what would turn out to be careers and things. Like my friend Viv, who I'm still in touch with. She's now a judge.
Oh, wow. Judge Viv.
Yeah, Judge Viv.
Nice.
And, and deservedly, and Phil actually rang me to tell me that Viv had been appointed a judge. She got a call from Michaelia Cash, apparently, and, we'd like you to be a judge.
That's cool. It's like the highest pinnacle level going down the Lord.
Yeah. Well,
What you
it's
aim for.
and look, she's worked so hard. She's one of the most ethical people I know, and very deserved, I think. But yeah, so I was looking around at all my friends and thinking they're all getting careers, and I'm, I've taken the wrong turn. I haven't, no education, and like literally 4 terms of secondary school is all I really did.
At 21, was that kind of a normal thought? Like, were people starting to choose careers and stuff by that age?
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, most of the people that I knew by the time I was 21, they were at uni.
Yeah.
Or even finished uni and starting to be looking for their first work. A lot of the people in the social circle that I grew up with were like a year older. And so they were a year ahead. And so when this opportunity came, I really embraced it hard. I want to make a go of this. And maybe so hard that I never managed to let it go.
Yeah.
And look, I do love it. It's one of the things because, once Brian decided that I would be an ideal candidate for a trainee editor, he had to sell me to his boss. And these guys, I think Roger Weatherstone was the owner of the company. I think there was some silent partners in there somewhere.
Well, I've got a question I wanted to ask you anyway. With what kind of work were they doing? Like, what was the work they wanted you to do?
Well,
I know you were doing video editing, but what kind of what type of film? Type stuff
sure.
was it?
So really like any good post house, anything they could get their hands on.
Yeah, yeah.
Majority was advertising. They got some work from Film Australia. Film Australia had a policy of farming work around the various companies so that everybody got a little bit of government work, and then there'd be some rock clips, occasionally rock clips, TV programs, things like that. No, I remember. So Brian had to go and sell the idea of employing me, and one of the things that has the idea of which stuck with me ever since, he said, look, this kid is the son of an artist and a science teacher. So that's like the intersection of art and technology, and that's exactly what we're doing here.
Wow, it's actually pretty crazy.
And and look, in a way, I think that's part of it all for me as well. It's I love the technology and I love the art. To create things, to come up with clever solutions to problems and things like that.
It's very creatively expressive, film editing, and even as simple as my job, which is like literally cut between you talking and me talking. Even that little simple task, I try and go to the millisecond of where I think the best encapsulation of being a part of the conversation will look like, And of course, there's little things like, raise the sound here, lower the sound here, mute me burping, all these little tiny things. But then sometimes a burp works well in the conversation, or a sneeze. Of, things like that.
The unexpected can... Look, I remember working on a Hoodoo Gurus video, and initially I didn't realise that the Vision mixer had suffered a PAL phase error or something, and so the colours were just 180 degrees inverted. And I go, oh shit, the client's in. It was actually, I think, Kimball Rendell. I hope I'm not telling tales out of school. Sorry, Kimball, if I am. And I'm going, oh my God, I've got to get this fixed. So I started pushing the panic buttons. These big post houses would have, a team of engineers. So, the maintenance, they call them either the engineering department or the maintenance department. And these guys would sit and build little gizmos for the benefit of the company until something broke, and then they'd come running and fix it usually while you're sitting there, or at least come up with a solution. I mean, bear in mind, at Apocalypse had 4 edit suites. Edit 1 was like the Premiere suite. If you booked Edit 1 with all the bells and whistles, there's additional devices and things that, you had to pay more for, you could be paying nearly $1,500 an hour.
Damn.
to make TV commercials and things like that. So time was critical, and it's not just that, but also the embarrassment of things not working when, you've got the most important agency in town, making their ads in your suite and it breaks. They go, oh, fuck this, we'll go to the next place, So fixing these things urgently was critical. So I started pressing the panic button, and then the director goes, well, hang on, it really looks kind of cool. And the sort of error that it was kind of undetectable because it was 180 degrees phase shift. It's just all the colours, were whack.
Yeah.
And he liked it. So we ended up making this whole clip for the Hoodoo Gurus with this colour inversion. So things like that happen quite a lot, Oh my God, what's that? Show me that again. Let's go with that, and it's just
like accidental effects,
an accidental serendipity.
That's pretty cool because today people are probably trying to add that same effect that came up by accident.
Yeah, well, that's right. And, look, back then it was also highly strung that, the technical demand was really highly strung, But now you can do anything, really.
Yeah.
I mean, back then you couldn't edit within a frame more often than not because it all had to follow a sequence, and the sequence was it's all like harmonics and things. It's sort of it's not worth going into, really.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
Suffice to say, it was ridiculously complicated. But yeah, so and those technical departments, and I think you run Blackmagic gear.
Yeah.
So Grant Petty is the CEO, the owner, I think, of Blackmagic, and he was a maintenance engineer in a company in Melbourne, just very similar to the sort of company I work for in Sydney. And look, so I don't know whether I should work him in here now or not. He went on to make what I call buggery boxes, little utility boxes, about the size of a packet of cigarettes. That you put one sort of video in one end and get a different sort out the other end, and making them cheap. And it's like it was the dawn of the digital age. So I can remember I went freelance in 1989. So in a way, I haven't had a real job since 1989.
Wow, that's crazy. It's not that too long. It's like 8 years since you kind of first got into it, eh?
Yeah, well, yeah, 8.
And did you work at the same place with, what was his name, start with a B, that hired you?
Brian?
Brian.
No, I worked with him. Well, actually, he got fired just before I quit. And him getting fired was a whole story. He was feisty, and he shoot from the hip, like shoot now, ask questions later. So we'd all been out in his big 4-wheel drive for lunch. A couple of the other people and so we better hurry back, and we'd all been drinking wine, I think, and we've got a booking this afternoon. I think I was supposed to be doing the edit for this client. It was a new client. Anyway, Brian dropped me at the entrance to the car park because it'd be quicker for me to go up. And just in front of us was this like MG convertible drove in. So Brian dropped us off so we could go up and get set up for the edit. Went down, got to his car park, and this MG convertible was parked in his spot. So he got out and tore strips off this guy. He'd had a few drinks after all. Get the fuck out of my car. Who do you think you are? You're going to fucking... So Brian parked and then got in the lift, and so did this other guy, and this guy turned out to be the client.
Yeah.
Right? And so the management decided that this was the last straw. Brian always sailed close to the wind. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock was gin and tonic time. He'd go and get money from petty cash. They basically said, you're not allowed to do that, but he just ignored them. Go and get $40. I'd have to go over to the bottle shop and get a bottle of gin and some tonic and some lemons. And then I was the barman, to be,
Yeah.
and so Brian was a bit wild and reckless.
Yeah.
And so he got the bullet, and I mused on how my boss had been fired before me for the first time ever. And I say to people, the most successful thing I've ever done in my life was get fired from about 7 jobs, because if I hadn't, God forbid, I might still be packing plastic fruit in a plastic fruit distribution company,
Yeah.
or something like that. Back at Grant Petty, so I went freelance. I did various things, had some extraordinary times, got on a crew to go to Beijing in 1994 to do a huge exhibition of IBM technology for the Chinese government. And So I got to go to the Great Wall and the Forbidden City and all of that, and it was just really interesting. A few other great opportunities for travel. But I ended up doing a lot of work for a company called Visualize, and they were getting a lot of work doing independent documentaries. And they were quite cheap, and because they were paying me as a freelancer. And so it all worked out really well. We suddenly became the place to go and finish a documentary, and that was all going really well.
How much would you say fairly cheap to be able to do a documentary? How much would a documentary cost back in 1994, 5?
Look, I couldn't really tell you, but I mean, I think they were charging about $450 an hour,
Yeah.
right? And it might have taken 20 hours, 30 hours. But it all depends. And things have changed so much. Back then, documentaries pretty well didn't get any colour grading.
Yeah.
Unless it was maybe shot on film, and then as they transfer the film to video through a system called Telecine, they would do a grade. But for the most part, if it was shot on video, it wouldn't get colour graded. Mind you, back then things weren't shot raw. What you got out of the camera was a pretty good signal, and the camera people would be very good at tweaking the camera to get the best possible pictures. And then, apart from maybe the brightness and how much colour, that's what you got. But at that time, we started looking at trying to grade a bit. And then within a few years, grading was becoming, de rigueur.
And then you started shooting the videos so they were a bit worse, so you could grade them a bit better.
Say, how do you mean?
So I'm pretty sure that, if you want to get the best quality, you film it pretty shit, so then you can grade it so it actually looks good.
Well, yeah. So it's raw is this system. There's various levels of raw. Fundamentally, it's a way of raising the blacks and lowering the whites so that you're not losing any detail, right? Because the detail in the whites and the detail in the blacks is where quality sort of lives, the perceived quality, when all the whites are just burnt out and flat white and all the dark bits are just black, it looks like shit, really. So to preserve that is the ideal. And so now, and then there's other things. There's debayering, and it's almost like you can change all the camera parameters in the edit suite.
Yeah, okay.
It's amazing where it's going. But so back then, very little color grading. We pushed to get a Quantel system. They looked at all these other systems, and look, it could be said that, getting the Quantel system killed Visualize. It was certainly hard. But this system was $1 million. And it was funny the day that it was delivered. 4 big boxes arrive in reception, and that's $1 million.
Yeah.
And but at the time, it was about the best kit available. But then, and so I haven't finished the story about Grant Petty, who was the Black Magic owner, who, right, but we'd get jobs in and quote people, and they'd come and, think, we did a good job for them. And then their next job, no, we're going to frame, set and match. Oh, how come? Oh, we've got a bit of a better budget this time, and we want to use Da Vinci.
Okay.
Oh, you want to use what? Oh, it's the best. Da Vinci's the best grading system. Well, I'd never seen Da Vinci. I was only familiar with Quantel.
And what years were these? This
would have been the late 90s.
Late 90s. So still before I was born. I didn't even realise that Da Vinci would have been that old.
Oh, yeah, Da Vinci. I think Da Vinci probably was born in the early 90s.
Wow.
And I think it was a Canadian company. But so much of this stuff, like Quantel's gone pretty well. Ampex. I think Ampex might still be making medical equipment. But these were all huge names in the video industry. And I think what happens is bright people come up with great ideas. They get investors, they monetize it, and suddenly, like Da Vinci, I don't know, but say Da Vinci might have sold 400 units worldwide at $1 million a unit or something. So these guys have made good money, you know, and now they're enjoying life on their yacht in Monte Carlo. And, well, who cares about the company? You know, I'm having a great life, thank you very much. So the company starts to atrophy and more often than not just disappears. But in this case, and so this brings us back to Grant Petty, this guy who was a clever engineer who started making devices. So while I was working at Visualize, there was some equipment exhibition on somewhere, and the part of the lure was, you know, come and win the Lucky Door prize. And the Lucky Door prize was it discrete logic? Oh, what were they? Anyway, the company that made it was at the time the big opposition to Quantel. They made Flame, they made Inferno, they made there's a bunch of different levels of effects, and they had the Lucky Door prize, which was it was called Combustion. And it was a desktop version of Flame maybe. Flame ran on a huge, millions of dollars worth of computer, and, it did all the fanciest effects available at that time. And Combustion could virtually do the same if you were patient enough for your little computer to crunch it through, right? So anyway, we won the door prize, and so we've got Combustion. Great. Let's get into it. What do we need? A computer. Oh, we need a computer with dual processors. And all right, and a graphics card. Or not a graphics card. I'm sure the graphics card was probably required, but not like we use now. And what it needed was a video in-out card. And you probably don't even use one. I use one because I want to get my vision out onto a calibrated monitor and have that confidence knowing that monitor's been lined up by a guy with scopes and yada. And so you can have confidence that white is white, that, the perceived green is actually green and not just an aberration that's created by a badly aligned monitor or something like that. So it's important, but a lot of work now, you don't even need one of these cards.
You can just trust the monitor so much.
But back then, well, yeah, you can trust monitors. And look, there's also ways, color grading with Da Vinci. You can test that. What color is that? And it will give you a numerical RGB readout. So, like 100, 100, 100 is grey, or if it's 0 to 100, then it's white, if it's 100, 50, 100, then there's green missing, so that'll be purple, and so on. So anyway, this video in-out card, and of course back then all our video is sort of, well, the Quantel system was digital, but it's really digital internally. Mm-hmm. Like we weren't kind of running digital, well, we were running SDI, serial digital interface, I think. It's putting digital video down the same cables as the analog. And so, it was sort of, we were in both worlds at the same time for a while. But anyway, so, okay, we've got to get this video in-out card, and that means we can suck video in and squirt it back out again. Because moving files around in those days, like you could create a file and send it to Quantel, but anyway, starting to try and remember how do we do things, but we had to get this in-out card, and so we'll get an in-out card. I think Aja was the cheapest at about 13 grand.
Yeah.
And so the management at Visualize like, oh, well, that's not happening, you know.
Yeah.
And then there was this hint, there was a digital voodoo or something. And, so where are they? And then as soon as we sort of almost on it, they'd evaporated. What's going there? And then, maybe not even a year later, Black Magic came out with a video in-out card for a computer for $999.
Yeah.
Not $13,000. Suddenly $999 is affordable, and we got it. And this was Grant Petty, and this was one of his early products, and it just took the world by storm. So suddenly people go, Aja, 13 grand, we'll get a Blackmagic card. And so between that and all these other little converter boxes and all sorts of things, like, because, with this digital video, there's, I think, 16 audio tracks you could have. And so he'd build little boxes that would break out the audio, or split the audio out, or insert the audio into a video signal. And so I had a few of his bits of gear. And look, as time went by, Visualize closed down, as most places do. It's such a tough game.
Yeah.
Unless you're really doing the top-notch TV commercials and stuff. Well, it's not TV commercials anymore, really. It's just commercials. But that level of post-production is still out there. But it's such a game. And I'm too good at telling people to get fucked with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, advertising. Look, there's some great people in advertising, but when you really think about it, advertising is really trying to convince people to spend money that they don't need to spend on stuff that they don't need to buy.
Yeah, true.
And
they get me, but every time.
well, and I became look, I was brought up in a world, my mother was kind of like the anti-ad lady. If she saw an ad for it on TV, she didn't buy it, and I think that probably had some impact on me. But anyway, I had a bunch of Blackmagic devices already. I had a router, which is just a really great way of moving signals around just by typing in, I want that vision to go to that place, or this to, and I had some in-out cards. I had 2 computers with Blackmagic in-out cards. So I was on their mailing list. I remember one day, when it was about 2007 or 8, I probably should look it up maybe, but looked in my in-tray emails, and there was this marketing email from Blackmagic. It goes, oh, hi. When I was a young lad working as an engineer in a facility in Melbourne, we'd wait until the clients went home, and we would go into the Da Vinci grading suite and get down, and face the east and worship this pinnacle in colour grading technology, and it was like this religious devotion we had, that it was just so awesome, and who could have made such incredible stuff. So, well, today I'd like to announce I bought the company. And, as I was saying earlier, these companies go into atrophy, and then you pick them up for a song. And so he did. And he quickly transformed it from what was really just a really fantastic colour grading platform into an editor. First, there was a bolt-on editor, and then Fusion. Not sure exactly when Fusion came into it. Fusion had been a product from a company called Ion, I think, and he bought Fusion. So Fusion, for those who don't know, is sort of like After Effects, The Adobe After Effects is a great, animation and effects platform. Fusion does a brilliant job. It's got a 3D engine that's really fantastic.
Sorry.
It's done the 3D work behind some really interesting movies, like I'm not sure which Planet of the Apes one has got the apes all going across a traffic jam across the Golden Gate Bridge, I think it
That's
is.
the second one, yeah.
And so I think that was all composited in Fusion. And, I used to go and look at, fascinate over how they did it, sort of video and watch all that.
So originally because for everyone who's listening, they might not understand, like everything that you're explaining, they're all parts of the one software that I use to cut and edit all my videos.
That's right.
But originally they were all completely different outsourced companies and devices you'd have to buy and manually plug and play with them.
Yeah, well, sort of, I suppose, just elaborating on what you're saying, that you do that bit in there and then you'd have to export it from there and start this one and then import it into there and do a little bit on that and then export it again and put it somewhere else. And Adobe does that with its range of products, and there is some sort of interchangeability, like, you can do something in Photoshop and it'll update in After Effects, but it's still not quite as nice as doing it all in the one box, the one, under the one roof.
Yeah.
On the one software platform. Maybe, I certainly still go back to After Effects quite a lot. And I use Photoshop. Photoshop's a great product. In fact, I don't know how true it is, and people should do their own research. But as I understand, Quantel had the video paint box, and that predated Photoshop. And I think they actually sued Photoshop for stealing code back in the early days. I'm sure that's on the record somewhere.
Yeah.
I think Quantel did that quite effectively because they were early pioneers. Quantel came up with a video disc that did slow-mos and things way back in the very early 80s, maybe even the late 70s. So some of the first slow-mos was a big problem for video because it had to be travelling at the right speed, or else nothing worked.
Yeah. So in this time, are you still using the same softwares to do the same kind of work? You're still working on the documentaries because you weren't really opposed to doing the commercials and advertisement side of things. There's still lots of small documentaries.
So yeah, when I started, it was a great little anecdote from, I think it was my first TV commercial, and the company had teamed me up with this young guy from an advertising agency, Simon White. Don't know whatever came of Simon White, and he was a great guy, really, and it was the Daily Mirror. You probably don't even know the Daily Mirror. It got swallowed up by the Telegraph or vice versa, and it was just it was very much like the Daily Telegraph, and so the Daily Mirror, and so I got to do my first commercial with Simon White, and they sort of teamed us up because they thought we'd probably work well together, and I really liked working with him. I think I finished it at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
and at that point I was living back home. And I did end up going back home from time to time when I fell over and, couldn't keep my shit together, in wherever I was living, and I ended up back home. So I was living at home. I finished work. I think I got a cab home. They paid for a cab for me to go home. And then my mother came in at sort of 8:30 on her way out to work. Why aren't you getting up? Why aren't you getting up? Oh, no, I didn't get home until 3 a.m. 3 a.m., what were you doing? What were you doing until 3 a.m.? I said, Mum, I edited my first commercial. She said, what, until 3 a.m.? Yes. She said, well, if it took you until 3 a.m., you must have been doing something terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And really, to this day, she doesn't really appreciate the focus that goes into creating these things, And it's funny. So, look, for years, that was my first commercial. It wasn't long because I'd been at Channel 9, right? And I got the bullet from Channel 9. 6 months later, now one of the things that when Padgett was sort of embarking on his speech about how and why he was firing me and everything, he told me I was no good for tapes. I don't know why he thought I was no good for tapes. I think I did offend him early on by telling him that what I really wanted to do was get into news cameras, and I would never have made it. To be a news cameraman, you really got to be a bully. It's about elbowing your way in front of Channel 7 and Channel 2 and getting the shot.
Yeah.
And it's bloodthirsty. But of course that was sort of a different department, and so I was sort of, it's like being unfaithful,
Yeah.
But he said, you're no good for tapes, so I'm firing you. Okay, well, so off I went. 6 months later, we'd been working on, I think, a revision. So the way these things went, the client would brief you, and it's got to be on air tomorrow, right? So you finish it at 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe. Somebody from the agency presents it to the client at 9 a.m. The client goes, oh, no, that's a hunk of shit. Do it again, right? And so it's on air at 4 in the afternoon. What do you got to? You've got to come up with something different. You've got to make it better, whatever it is. And I remember being there this one afternoon. It'd been about 6 months out. I was editing. Maybe it was 8 months. I can't remember exactly. And we've got to get this on air. How are we going to get it? And I said, oh, well, I can deliver the Channel 9 one. Oh, really? Can you? Yeah, sure. I'll just take it straight into tapes. So, finished, ran off a copy, jumped in the car, drove to Channel 9. Security guard at the gate, oh, hi, Roen, what are you doing back here? I've just got to deliver this. No worries. Visitor parking, reception, hi, guys, up into tapes. Roen, what are you doing here? I'm just delivering this commercial. Oh, what commercial is it? Oh, it's key number. So commercials all run on key numbers, and it's like the serial number of that commercial. And it's TVC 001/9. Oh, we're all looking for that. That's supposed to be on air in half an hour. This is it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. How did you get it? I just finished making it. Bullshit.
Yeah.
No, I did. Who edited it? I did.
Yeah.
Oh, bullshit, And they couldn't believe it. And I think it's kind of ironic. I think at the time I was probably the youngest online editor in Australia. And now I'm probably the oldest online editor in Australia.
Yeah.
And that the term online editor was to differentiate between offline editors. And so the reason for that, well, as I say, $1,400 an hour, for example, you can't afford to sit and make the creative decisions to imagine a documentary. Some of these documentaries, they spend 6 months editing. At $1,400 an hour, forget it, right? So they had this system where they would copy all the camera footage to a U-matic. Now, U-matic was a 3/4-inch tape. The whole system was much, much cheaper than 1 inch. The quality was much, much poorer. And so what they'd do is they would put, and that had a whole evolution of its own as well. And there was an Australian company called Digitize, Digitize? They made Shotlister. Yeah, I think it was Digitize. And they came up with this product called Shotlister, which was a bolt-on to the 3/4 inch technology. So initially, you'd get your audio and burnt-in timecode. And so somebody would sit there, and it was just cuts only. And so they'd edit it together just on 2 U-matic machines, right? And a U-matic machine was like maybe $3,000 or $4,000 or something, as opposed, well, maybe more, but much cheaper than $120,000 for a 1-inch machine. And then, after they'd finished the edit, and people would do like whole documentaries, longhand, the in number, the out number, the in number, the out number, right? And then that would come to the online editor in the online suite. And so maybe the first 2 hours of the booking would just be typing these numbers in to the computer controller. So Shotlister came along and it logged the edits. So then what they would do is put the audio on track 1 and the time code on track 2. And then when you did an edit on the U-matic, it would, there's relay closure, a relay closure to go start the edit and a relay closure to go stop the edit. And at that relay closure, it would trigger Shotlister to take a snapshot of the time code. And so 2 bits of time code would be an in point and an out point, and then that would get logged. And then the next one would get logged. And then suddenly you've got a list that's generated. So Shotlister, I mean, I started working freelance for Visualize. Shotlister had actually been developed by one of the partners that founded Visualize, a guy called Jack Schwartz. And Jack and a computer guy whose name I can't remember developed this system. Now, some years later, Ruth was the manager at Visualize, got a call from an English editor. Oh, hello. Look, I'm from England and I'm an editor, and I just thought I'd stick my nose in and see what the industry in Australia's like, And she said, oh, yeah, come on in, And so I think, well, because of the relationship with Digitize and Shotlister, I think Visualize had like 4 Shotlister suites or 5 Shotlister suites. They're like offline suites, so they're, cheap to rent, and people would edit their documentaries in there for hours, for weeks, As this guy came in, he said, oh, I think it's marvellous that you people have taken up this technology, I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you've got Shotlister, that's really advanced. She goes, mate, we invented it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think so. It's an English product. No, mate, it's Australian.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And Jack held on to it. And so, look, I don't know the full story, but as I understand, Jack was offered some pretty good money to sell it up to the big boys. And he wanted to hang on to it. And he hung on to it, trying to make it bigger and bigger. And all the while, non-linear editing is coming along. And in a way, because of that, he missed the boat.
Yeah.
He tried to come up, Dave, digital audio video editing or something like that. And it was sort of like a quasi system where it would record something onto a computer hard drive. But the challenges then were, like I said right at the beginning, the amount of data and how quickly you can move it, right? And I'm going to say, when I first went freelance, Lightworks and is it Lightworks? And what's that other one? Avid, they were all fledgling and everybody was going crazy. I just want to I just want to work non-linear. Looks like shit, it's, but you can change your edits and, you're not limited to this linear thing and, if you change your mind, it's not going to take you a week to fix it and, but it's yucky, isn't it? And so I ended up becoming sort of Dr. Steam driven. And, because I could line up these old analog machines and keep the wheels turning, I got tons of work, and because all my colleagues, I remember one guy that I used to work with, he said, "Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing now?" I said, "Oh, I'm working at this place." "Oh, really? What have they got?" "Oh, they've got a BVE 900, an old Sony sort of editor." "Oh, I wouldn't work on that if you paid me." I went, "Really? If they paid you, how much?" "Oh, yeah, I suppose."
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, for a decade I made good money and revelled. But my time at Visualize really turned me around a lot, and I started to, well, as it says on my website, that's cbdigital.tv.
Link in the description.
cbdigital.tv, and it's got a good portfolio of my work and a bit of my bullshit wank. But as I say, I started to realise that I'd rather do diabetes awareness videos than ads for sugary soft drinks.
That's a good fucking mentality, actually.
And so, I started meeting these filmmakers who were really, really strongly ethical people, creative people, people with something to say. And I really enjoyed working with them. And so, although it hasn't been as lucrative, it's kept me busy, and it's enabled me to work on fantastic projects, many of which are on the website, and you can go and see. I mean, I can't put whole programs up. It's, there's copyright issues and, I'm not the copyright owner. But I've got little clips and things that sort of highlight the work and sort of, flob on about techniques that I've used to, to achieve things and things that I've found worthy and,
I guess through the years you would have had, and I was thinking about this a lot while we were having this conversation, you would have learnt a lot about so many different things, especially working on so many documentaries, because a documentary is literally just an educational piece. That's all it is. It's just teaching you something you didn't know. You would have had so much information all the time, and then now, especially trying to work with more ethical things, you'd come across some cool stuff.
Yes. Well, look, it's completely true. And I suspect part of the reason I got fired from 6 jobs is because I just get bored so easily.
Yeah.
And I just can't, I just find it impossible to pretend, to put a smile on my face every day while packing plastic fruit or something,
Yeah.
And so, one of my analogies for being an editor, well, particularly an online editor, because there's still that terminology, online editor, offline editor. So these offline editors will spend weeks and weeks just on the one project. I think that would probably test me as well, right? I need fresh material. And so one of my analogies is that my job is sort of like driving a car. You know where all the controls are, you know how to change gear and, go fast or slow, turn left or right. But what's in front of you is changing all the time. So
that's cool. And it's never really the same roads either. It's always a new road.
It's always new roads. And so that's really good. And and I think probably, my schooling was poor for a similar reason. I didn't want to learn that. That was boring, and I wanted to go and get my head into something else, And And look, my mother was a school teacher. She went on to finish her science degree, and she became a geologist. So she's got honours in geology. But she was a real, like, an educational gorilla, if you like. You know, GUE, not gorilla like primate gorilla, but a gorilla like a, you know. And so we're always being taught shit. And, you know, so my whole childhood was getting rammed with education. And I didn't mind, you know, I like that.
Yeah, well, I think I'm addicted to just any new piece of information I can come across. So my number one thing I watch is usually documentaries. Like especially Netflix actually bangs out some mad documentaries nowadays. Hasn't been any for a little bit, but there's still plenty to watch. And if it's not that, it's podcasts, because I love listening to people's stories. I can't really do music. I can't really do really that many sitcoms and anything like that. I just love new stories, new something like that.
Information is great.
Yeah.
And look, we were already talking about it earlier, that the explosion through the internet, and, you know, they say that I know that the time has increased, but you know, when the internet was a little bit younger, they'd say every person now has access to 1,000 times more information than the President of the United States had at his disposal 25 years ago or something.
Well, I like the analogy that we are walking around in our pockets with every piece of information ever learnt in human history.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's so empowering, but look, we're going through growing pains with all of this at the moment. The polarisation, politics and everything, the Conservatives against the Progressives. And I think part of that is because of the democratisation of opinion.
Yeah.
And everybody now gets to publish their opinion. And then their opinion inflames somebody else, who then has to publish their response, and then suddenly everybody's at war.
Well, everyone's always had a voice, but not everyone's been heard until now.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And look, it's hard. It's, you know, people want their opinions to be reality. But actually, you know, and that's the post-fact world, they say. We're living in a post-fact world. You know, facts don't matter anymore. It's, you know, oh, well, in my opinion, clouds don't bring rain, you know.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say. I'm right.
Well, I think sometimes it gets stretched even further, where people want other people's to validate their opinions as well. People don't even just want to have their own. People want to make sure other people adopt theirs. So they're not just saying clouds don't create rain. I don't care what you say. They're saying clouds don't create rain. Agree with me.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. But it's the only world I've ever grown up in, I've got to be honest.
Yeah. Well, actually, and this is an interesting thing. I was just discussing this with my wife the other day. You know, for 15 years ago, or quite a long time, we bought a new fridge, right? It dispenses cold water and ice. And to my wife and I, that's this sort of luxurious novelty, you know, like, oh, the fridge's got ice and water, you know. But to my two children, that's just what a natural fridge is.
Yeah.
You know, and that it's applicable in so many ways, you know, that maybe I observe that because I'm 65, you know, and I can look down from my age and see people coming up and sort of see that these things are realities.
Well, my mum told me a story not that long ago, maybe only 5-6 weeks ago, maybe, that she remembers her mum going and doing a course on how to use the microwave. Like, went to an actual course, for like 2 days or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking,
well,
what could you possibly learn
Well-
in a 10-minute course on how to use a microwave.
Yeah, but there's techniques, girls, like, there's so many little weird things, but also the opportunity to charge people for a course,
Yeah. But that's just on the subject of like how quickly and how crazy it is for me to wrap my head around the fact that even when you're talking about all these different ways that editing evolved over time, there's apps nowadays like CapCut, which is an app on your phone. It's the free version or a pro version. And in CapCut, you have a effects or templates categories. And through each one, you can have even things like, and I do reversing in my videos and fast forwarding and slow downs. And if your camera's just panning around an object, you can choose the difference in height and length and of how quickly and slowly you want these camera pans to go around. And it happens within milliseconds. As soon as I click blur motion, it'll transition into something that and that's just, I thought it's always been like this, like it's crazy.
Well,
I'm
not familiar with that you mentioned, but I know that in the world of video, professional video, there's always been what we always used to call the push button effect. And that's, you can have 19 effects. Just pick a number from 1 to 19, and you get that effect. And sometimes they're perfect, sometimes it's just the right effect for what you want. But it's easy to just go and whack effects on things. And the real kind of the mature approach is to put effects where they're needed. I often say to people, my best work, you don't know, is even there.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so
and
true.
Like there's one doc I worked on recently, and one of the key shots was, three of the main players arriving at a house for an important reason. And I think two of them came from one side, one came from another. And in the middle of this whole shot, there's some bloke in a ute doing like a 5-point turn in the middle of the street and then driving away. And it just fucked the shot.
Yeah.
So I spent about 7 hours removing the ute.
Yeah.
Right? And it was done by every time the ute moved out of that bit, you'd freeze it and stitch it into place, and then that bit. And so this composite of freeze frames, so that, and like it was a moving shot. So it's amazing what you can do now.
Yeah. You can just click and delete some, like, to be honest, you can just click and delete a lot of things now.
Well, you can, and object removal, and it's getting more and more clever. It's another one that, and I found this tutorial on how to put glasses on somebody with a handheld shot, right? And they're not wearing glasses. And so how do you do it? And it's so clever.
Yeah.
And so, like stabilization and tracking. I don't know whether you know.
Yeah.
So if it's a moving shot and you say, okay, that point there, I want that to be static, right? That means everything's going to move around that point, right? So then, like, if you're working with 1920 by 1080, like HD video, you put that into a much bigger space. So like 20,000 by 10,000 or something, whatever. Mm-hmm. Just big enough that movement will not be cut off by the edge of the frame, right? So then the person is static. Then you can do things like paint their face. Then you reverse the motion so it puts it back to movement again. And so the things you can do. So I employed that because it was a talking head interview situation, and the question beforehand had triggered the subject to cry. And so the next question had nothing to do with that, but they still had this tear rolling down their face. And so the director's like, can you get rid of the tear? Yeah, and so the same technique. You just lock it all off, paint the tear out, frame by frame, and then, reverse the tracking so that amazing what you can do.
Yeah.
And now, I just worked on this job and the client wanted to make social media snippets out of a bigger documentary. How do we do it? Like, well, they want topics like this, and this. So there's this new product called Eddie AI. I don't know that you've heard of it. Look it up.
I think so, yeah.
Eddie AI.
I don't want to have to do this and get towards the end of the episode, but everyone listening knows that I do have to sometimes wrap them up early because the cameras have their issues. But I don't want to wrap it up just yet. Because I was curious to ask you, and sorry, I can't remember exactly where the camera cut off in the middle of our last conversation.
No, I can't either. So.
But one thing I was curious about is what's been some of your favourite things that you have worked on over the years? Favourite pieces and films or documentaries?
I guess wrapped up with that drift from commercial work into stuff that I like working on is that I like working on it. It has to be something that I feel is worthy and good. I do very little work that isn't at least somehow worthy or good. Some of the best things I worked on is that When the Camera Stopped Rolling was a documentary made by Jane Castle and Pat Fisk about mainly about Jane's career as a cinematographer and the influence of her mother, a cinematographer. And it was a very extraordinary piece, and surprised it didn't win more awards, but it was well recognised. What else have I enjoyed working on? Barry Humphries flashbacks. 4 episodes of Barry Humphries presenting as Barry Humphries, but all peppered with his characters as well. Mm-hmm. And that was a very nice, stylish thing. But there's lots of things. There's, on the internet, and bearing in mind, as an online editor, I used to feel pretty special and, but it took lots of people to get that job there. And my role wasn't that significant, really. But some of them were really good. And what's it called? Joe, what's his name? Joe, he used to have a band called Jojo Zepp and the Falcons, but this was Joe Camilleri. Joe Camilleri and the guitarist from Cold Chisel, Ian Moss, and that's this song called Ain't Love the Strangest Thing. It's up on YouTube, and I loved working on. I still love that song. I still love to get it out and watch it on YouTube. There's other things. There's another one on YouTube. One Room to Let. I think it was the first big drama directed by emerging director James Bogle. I think, and I just pulled that out the other day to watch. And it had great people in it. Miles Buchanan was in another movie called Bliss. But look, I'm drifting and waffling. I've worked on great things, and it's really hard to kind of identify any one in particular. And often the greatest thing that I'm working on is what I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
And because that sort of these things tend to become a bit of an obsession. Thinking about it all the time, thinking how it could be better, what you can put into it, So yeah,
it's cool. Sorry, keep going.
Perfect job for somebody with ADHD.
Yeah. Well, you're constantly getting new things and new stimulants, and I think to be constantly in love with the current project that you're working on shows that you definitely picked the right career.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's true. And it's look, I mean, it's not all roses, and I fight, and people come in. Well, look, I'm sure they've got their opinion of why things went wrong, but I often feel it's got to do with their insecurities, and because they're a bit awkward about what they're doing or how they're doing it. Generally, I have good relationships with professional people. Some professional people are a bit weird.
Definitely.
And look, it's what makes filmmakers colourful, they've got stuff they want to say, stories to tell, and some of them get very obsessive about their path, and how they want to do it.
You're finding that real balance between how the editor's meant to do it, the filmmaker's meant to do it, even the photographer's meant to do it. Like, it's kind of a big moving part to get everyone's expressions out in the same little shot in it.
Well, it's, it's an organic thing. The director has a vision, they want it to go that way. The cameraman will come on board and he'll go, well, we could shoot it like that. Oh, that's a great idea. Or the director will go, no, I want it more like that. And so they'll come up. So everybody kind of has some input, even though the overall direction is the vision of the director or the producer. I remember somebody once explaining to me the difference between a director and a producer. He says, well, the director says, I want a battalion of men coming over the hill with machine guns. I want 3 FA-18s coming across it. And the producer goes, you've got to be joking.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's cool. Well, I tell you what, I'm actually ashamed we have to wrap up the episode because I want to be able to keep picking your brain about so much of the editing side of things and how much the technology has changed over time. But I guess you've been there to witness not just the birth of technology evolving in films of editing and camera work and even color coding and all that stuff, but I guess the internet in itself has been a whole new thing. And for me, all these things have just always been there,
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the story about the fridge with the water and the ice, it's like things when you don't see the evolution of it, you just assume that it's always been or that it's normal. Look, I think the world's going, if we can just get through global warming and Ukraine and Gaza and America and but there's a lot of hope, I think, a lot of things to feel good about. Technology. There's so much to talk about. I mean, I could waffle for hours.
Oh yeah, so could I. But on that note as well, I get what you're saying. Like, even though it can be used, and we mentioned the fact before, everyone has an opinion now that we have this evolving technology, and everyone can also do the same thing as a producer, an engineer, director, and an editor at the same time with their phone now as well. There's so much opportunity for everyone to be as creatively expressive as ever before, which is pretty awesome. Because I've didn't pick a career in it, but I'm still able to enjoy the benefits of figuring it all out,
Yeah. Oh, well, and look, you are. I mean, who knows where your future will take you. But certainly getting amongst all this stuff, there's a big world
it's
within all of this,
Yeah.
and it's fun.
Yeah. Well, it was awesome to be able to meet you. Was it Friday? Friday, I think it was.
Yeah, Friday
I
came into the suite to have a look.
Checked out the studio. Yeah, way more fancy. If anyone listening who's ever seen my setup, it is way more complicated and fancy than all of this.
It's a different. It's just to do a different job, really.
Yeah. But it's cool. It's very cool. And I do really appreciate you for coming and giving me your time today as well. I'll definitely have you back on in the future as soon as I'm able to sort everything out. I told you about the new studio and be able to articulate the conversation exactly where we left off, because there's an endless amount of time in between there to pick your brain about.
thank you for inviting me.
All right. For everyone listening, I'm not wrapping it up just yet. I have one final question. I thank you, Joel, sitting off camera for reminding me it. But it's the same question that I ask every single person that's done an episode so far. So I'm very glad you reminded me. I would have had to AI put that back in on my own. But it's just a piece of advice. I feel like sometimes people need to hear something, and sometimes the right words can just impact people by accident, But I ask everyone, if someone came to you for a piece of advice because they were feeling a bit depressed, mostly because they were just lost, is there any advice you would give that person?
Yeah, look, you can get down in the dumps. Just pick yourself back up again. Like you just got to keep going. That's all. You just, there's nothing that should be terminal. It's, you just keep going. And it can be, really bleak and difficult at times. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you just got to keep going.
It couldn't have been answered any more perfect than that, to be honest, because at the end of the day, it's going to be okay. And that's what some people just don't understand. When you just say, just keep going, because that's literally all you have to do in order for it to get better.
Learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
Learn from your mistakes. Don't make the same mistake twice. Right? I think it was Einstein's great line that somebody who does the same thing over and over expecting a different outcome is an idiot.
Yeah.
So, and that's it. If you're unhappy with your life now, do things differently. Work out how to do things differently. Walk to work with a different route. Just doing the same thing over and over again isn't much chop, going back to the analogy of work, work, it's like, having change is really important. They say in psychology, you like to build routines. And they say it's like, if you can imagine a big ski slope that hasn't been skied yet, and it's all just powder, and there's no paths in it, right? But slowly, paths form. People go down the same track, right? And that they say that's sort of like how you have habits, and you just keep repeating that same track. And to change that track is difficult, and it can feel uncomfortable. But doing it anyway is fruitful. And, it to be constantly on a change means that you're always tilling new soil, and it's important.
Yeah, definitely. I really liked that. I really liked it when you said, when it came to like Einstein's favorite quote, it was just before that you said, "Don't repeat the same mistakes twice." No, that's to be honest, that stuck with me the most because I've always thought about my whole life. And I like to say, I'll never make the same mistake twice, but I'll make every mistake once.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's sometimes you just got to learn the hard way. But that can be very valuable. That can be valuable, learning the hard way.
Yeah. I love it. Let's keep moving forward. Yeah, it's simple as that, because that is seriously as simple as it might be. The cool thing to know as well is I like to repeat this every now and then on the podcast as well, that I learned it from Will Smith. It's one of his lines. He says, the two most important things every human should do is read and run. Because when you run, you get to learn to overcome that voice in your head that tells you to quit. And then you get to actually be the voice in front. And when you read, you realize that any problem you've ever gone through, everyone else has gone through it. Yeah. Well, as I tried to say once before in the podcast, I really do thank you for making it onto the channel.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, as I said.
And this was actually the end of the episode, so I didn't forget this time. Thank you for making it to the end of the episode. It was an amazing week this week. There'll be another one next week. That's a wrap.
All right.
Yeah, we heading for the sun. Shawty got my high, I ain't tripping for the fun. Yeah, I won't start, I ain't tripping, I'm a stunt.